evening. Welcome to the first summit of this academic year. The meeting of the WSESD, the meeting of the Vernon School Board, and the meeting of WSESU will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and the agenda. If anyone who is joining us virtually has trouble connecting, please let someone in the space know and we will do our very best to reconnect you. Nevertheless, this meeting will continue as posted. So, are we ready for public comment period? This is a time for all three boards to listen and to take notes. It is not a time for the boards to respond to comments or to engage in dialogue with the public. If appropriate, the boards and administration will work on next steps. So I do not see any hands up in terms of public comment, and unfortunately I don't have an up-to-date agenda in front of me. So,
There it is.
okay, great.
Moving on to the consent agenda.
Okay, so we are moving on to the consent agenda, and this is for the WSESD. And if there are no objections, does anything need to be pulled out for correction or review? With that in mind, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda for the WSESD?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, it passes. Any abstentions? None. Thank you. Okay,
I would now entertain a motion to hear and to approve the WSESU warrants and payrolls.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? And the warrants of the WSESU are approved.
Okay, time for the Vernon warrants and payroll. We have the warrant of October 24th and payroll number 8. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Any questions? All those in favor of passing the warrants and payroll as presented? Aye.
Sorry. Administrative report.
All right, so we are up to the administrative report. Mark, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll start with 2 retirements. And for the SU board, Aaron Scott is retiring from special ed department at the high school.
I would entertain a motion to accept the retirement of Aaron Scott with regret.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for the SD board, Tom Dotton will be retiring in January as the assistant principal of dance.
So is there a motion to accept this retirement with regret?
So moved.
Point of order.
Yes,
I could be mistaken, but I
We did
believe
this, I
we,
thought.
I believe we did accept this resignation in our last meeting.
Okay,
Thank-
great.
yeah, I thought it was a repeat, yes, thank you. Mhm. We could reject it, though.
All right, well, tonight's focus is, of course, the October Summit. This is our second year in a row of holding summits and bringing all of our boards together. So before we dig into the meat of the presentation, I thought it would be nice if we just did some introductions around the table here. So I'll start and we'll work our way around at hand. Mark Spino, Superintendent.
I'm Bryn Tucker, Curriculum Director. Kelly Dias, Principal at Academy.
Frank Rucker, the Business Administrator.
Kim Price on the WSESD board and the WSESU board.
Stacy Sawyer, Pre-K to 6 Curriculum Coordinator.
Nancy Weiss, Director of the Windham Regional Career Center.
I'm Riley Bristol, Senior at BUHS and Student Rep.
I'm Willow Sharma, Senior at BUHS and Student Representative.
Tracy Dratz, I'm the board reporter.
Tim Maysale, SD.
Kate Margaitis, Principal of Green Street School.
Kevin Jury, Secondary Special Ed Coordinator.
Mary Kaufman, Principal of Oak Grove School. Hannah Parker, Principal of BUHS.
Mary Ross, Principal at Vernon Elementary School.
Matt Shibley, Board Clerk for the SD.
Julie Stoughton, Vernon School Board.
Cheryl Brown, Vernon School Board.
Daniel Amadon, Vernon School Board.
Julianne Egan, Dummerston Principal.
Tate Erickson, Director of Special Education.
Carrie Amadon, Vernon and SU.
Jessica Everlith, WSESD Board.
Ruby McAdoo, WSESD Board.
John Sessions, Principal of Putnam Central.
John Gagnon, Principal at Guilford Central.
Kaylee Richardson, Elementary Special Ed Coordinator.
Brandy Levesque, Early Childhood Special Ed Coordinator.
And Martha, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Martha Noyce, resident of, in Brattleboro.
Okay, thank you. Deborah Stanford, Chair of the SD and also on the SU.
I'm Ann Beekman, I'm on the SD and I'm Chair of the SU.
Super. So just an observation, it's pretty amazing to have so many people here dedicated to the success of our school system. I think it's really admirable. It says a lot about our school district, that so many adults and students in leadership positions care so deeply about the good work we're doing in the supervisory unit. So tonight's meeting, we got some feedback beginning of the year around length of these meetings, with a target around the 35-minute mark for a normal presentation. Was definitely shooting for that targeted timeline and developing this presentation tonight, but realistically, I think we're probably looking at 45 minutes, given the depth of the topics that we'll be covering. There is a note catcher that Stacy sent around, so you all have that to capture questions or thoughts and observations throughout the presentation. We also planned on an interactive section of the workshop tonight, so we will be breaking up into smaller groups, communicating with each other, collaborating on some various topics. So we have a protocol for that in place. And then in terms of follow-up questions, I would ask that you definitely use the note catcher, and we'll reserve a good chunk of time at the end of the presentation to review comments, observations, or questions that you may have. So I ask that we really hold until the end of the meeting, because many questions will probably be answered throughout the presentation tonight. But obviously we will dedicate time at the end for those discussions. Okay, so first slide, just the overall agenda or the framework for the meeting. We'll be taking a closer look at our Common Assessment Plan, our assessment toolkit, do a review of our CIP plan, and what went into the process for developing that. We'll do a deep data dive, looking at VTCAP data, which has finally been released, as well as fall benchmark data from this fall. So the most current data set that we have collected and had meetings at every school. There will be some time for some schools to do a sharing. We'll end the meeting looking at social emotional learning and frameworks that we have in place to support our students. So focus on academic achievement as well as social emotional supports and data to go with those topics. Before we jumped into the presentation, I did want to take some time to review this core value worksheet that the central office has been putting time and energy into throughout the fall. And I was able to bring these to our first full professional development day at the high school in the auditorium. That's kind of how we kicked off that morning of work. So all certified staff were in the building and heard what our core values are and what we're striving to work towards. So I thought it was appropriate to review that with this group. So the first one, at the center of everything, we want to be focused on our students and what's best for our students when we make decisions. We believe in integrity and accountability and how important that is. There are many systems, legal systems, that go through central office. Sometimes they don't make sense to others who may want things to work a certain way. But we had a lively discussion about that one with the group. People were very much so wanted that to be on the forefront in terms of integrity and accountability and transparency. Third, collaboration and collective efficacy. If we believe it can happen, it will happen if we put the time and energy in to fostering that growth. Equity and inclusion has been the center of our work for a handful of years now. So we wanted that to be represented in our core values. We want to work towards excellence and being excellent at our jobs and continually improving our practice as we learn throughout the school year. And finally, we're public servants. We are here to serve our communities and felt like that was an important thing to acknowledge. So I think you've seen the email, but I have sent these out to our communities as well in terms of all of our parents and caregivers. Next slide. This is an overview of our universal assessment plan. This has been a work in progress for close to 20 years. So many resources are loaded into this document. This is just an overview what it is, what it entails. From universal assessments that we use, diagnostic assessments to get additional information, progress monitoring tools. That is at the heart of the assessment toolkit, and we'll be referencing this throughout the evening tonight. And then lastly, before I turn it over to one of the other members of our team, there'll be about 5 or 6 of us discussing this slideshow representing the full team. But I thought this slide is very important. This is a quote from the AOE citing statute in terms of how to go about continuous improvement and developing your plan. So I'm not going to read the quote to everybody, but maybe take 30 seconds or so for everybody to kind of read that quote. So this really is the approach that we've taken in developing improvement plans for not only each school, but the supervisory union. So I thought it would be important to share that. Next section, we're gonna dig deep into our data and what is our data telling us. So Stacy will.
All right, so you have a note catcher, and we're about to mix up into some small groups for a minute. We want to give everyone an opportunity. There's going to be a lot of slides with bar graphs. We want to give everyone an opportunity to grapple with those bar graphs and make sense of them in small groups before we do a presentation. So on your note catcher, you're going to notice there's numbers 1, 2, and 3, language arts, VTCAP, math, and then our fall benchmark overview. We're going to put you into some groups, and in those groups I've got paper copies of the graphs to help give you an opportunity to look them over and think about those 3 questions. Where are the growth trends evident? Where would we want to see more growth, and what would be a potential target? And then what's a question that you have about the data set? During this grappling section, you're just gonna look at one of those 3 sections of data, and then we'll present all 3, and you'll be able to take notes on your note catcher for the 2 that you didn't have that opportunity to do that with. Does that make sense, how that's gonna work out? So if we'll advance to the next slide, you'll see your groups. I know we're gonna move around a little bit. We've got a lot of people in a tight space. With cords on the floor, we're really like setting up some real obstacles for everyone. So just as you're moving about, be aware of space, but we want to make sure that there's time for people to, we've put 2 groups for each section to try and make a smaller group so you can have time to talk to each other, bounce ideas. And so we're gonna look at some groups here, and I've got the handouts, so let me just see if I can make my way around.
Yes.
I'm gonna give a stack of ELA, so does this make sense the way this? 2 groups, Group A and B, are looking at English language arts. 2 groups, C and D, are looking at math. 2 groups are looking at fall benchmarks. And I'll come around with the handouts. I'm gonna give the handouts to the name that's listed first in those groups, or maybe second in some cases.
And if we made a mistake and did not add your name, just joke.
Deborah, can I give you this stuff? Jocelyn, one of these here.
She's online.
This is like our plan is like falling apart. We need to keep your in group B. Math, Kim, give you a stack for your group, Kim. And then Tim, you got a group, right?
Yes. Coming that way.
I was just ready to say.
And I've got Matt, perfect, and I'm gonna give Mary Ross.
Okay.
Perfect.
Group B.
Oh, I was the first here. Can we come back here? We can come back here. And come over here. So group C back in the corner.
No, we want
We're so great. We're so rare.
Yeah.
You're too.
Open C.
So I'm gonna set the timer for about 7 minutes.
Still in that spot.
I don't know who got it. Ben's not here. Michaela's not here. Ben's not here, Michaela's not here. Jocelyn's not here.
She's online as well.
And is there a cat here?
I'm here, Cat is not in person.
Okay,
Hi, Jocelyn.
so there's only 3 of us in
Hi,
person.
everyone.
Alright.
looking at the spring VTCAP results. And then, so we're section 2 here, that's true. And I think we're initially responding alone and then sharing. Oh, I thought this was weird. Why was it?
Where the growth trends and where we want to see, is that what we're doing?
Yeah, where are growth trends, everything, where we want to see more growth, what's a realistic future target, and questions that we have.
Right, now, it's easy to see the growth trends there. Several schools.
Oh, wow.
Looking good here, Darmstadt, Green Street. Stability and several. And where we want to see more.
Yeah, we're real strong.
Screeners are, so
It's
Dimples
only
is a
one
screener, it's a benchmark assessment, it's a light dip to see where you're at.
Okay.
This is take your time period versus the VTCAP, you need more in-depth. Yeah, so these correlations for the Dimples with VTCAP, that's very strong, is a really good correlation, it gives you some predictiveness and also
this is the
difference either way, plus or minus. Whereas star is a little lower, I mean, it's still telling you something, but you take it with a little more of a grain of salt.
So maybe we can do
So this is showing
upwards trend.
Okay, now it's a little bit, we're actually on the bars to be small. So this is showing the difference in
Yeah, and then what
percentage of
what
kids
are, where we see this great
between those students
what
who
are
are
those
not
initiatives?
had a really low score and maybe we
So
want to
for
find out
example,
what
on
average it's
what
what
our kids not experiencing. Can you explain to me what's going on with their commitment to this WSESD Dimples? And then it's the same exact
Right, so all this variability, then this averages out at the SU level to show kind of a flat level of growth.
But like consistently flat over 2 years.
Over 3 years.
Below the
since we started doing
But then you see that just the real differences, some schools, you know, are really starting to thrive.
Now the way that the state
Guilford had a little bit of a decent struggle for 3 years, and we got quite a bit of turnover.
Like not one person, but star is a mess on there.
Yeah, they're not kind of Dimples for
it's not exactly apples to apples.
Because every year, like a student's grade level,
But it's a
you know,
benchmark.
grade out of, and another grade comes into the cohort changes. And there's the need to be unique to that grade level or the overall group. But it's sort of panning out that we're not seeing the hope to see.
Ideally, get them a benchmark.
So they're just kind of doing
But I am encouraged by all this math.
Yeah.
It looks like they fell off and then some of them has gone back up again.
Really, just overall. And we're looking to refine and figure out the little things that we can really improve. Because we feel like we have a lot of the pieces in place. And now we look at what's the results. Yeah, source of frustration.
Yes, but still,
We've got a lot of real quality policies that are really being implemented. I'm just around figuring out how to implement to the best, because it's a big program.
Well, shouldn't it?
And solve all the problems. Diligently.
That's right. I keep trying to work myself out of that.
You know what? At least all of you, please, like, just are good enough, we'll be unemployed, and that will be a good thing. It'll be a magic retirement.
And I will say, on a practical level too, we spend a lot of time with kids talking about love too. You know, saying like, we talk about
progress monitoring or monitoring the progress. We do that with tell me where you
Right,
relative
it's common sense.
and this is how where you run and future improvement, what do you think you did? And then
Specific learning
yes.
skills.
Are they in process?
I wanna make sure I'm-
Push it
yeah.
into users
I
of
mean,
their
I would
own
also just
protocol,
highlight that
leaders of their own learning environment.
there's an element of this data
You
that,
know,
especially in
right,
smaller
taking
schools, is
initiative.
sort of.
Although we
Yeah.
do take ownership of some students,
Their own progress
I,
and
they don't
Not-
report it that
But
way.
if you're prepared
Yeah.
school, that's pretty
Yeah.
remarkable and
It's
all
just-
that.
Well, I think
That
it
is
might
not
happen
just
for some
one
kids,
cohort.
and I heard about
Students
these
that
kids.
And emphasizing that's not.
If there
School
are
size is-
organizations
there's
in
only
communities,
about
it's best for
60
students to be able to
students.
access the
Right.
text
Each
because they
student
have great comprehension
represents
or
one student.
it's a different way to show.
There can be sort of swings.
Because there are monitors available, like
Reminds me,
yeah,
like,
the test.
you know, so we do have some VUHS data from
This
past
represents
year.
only ninth grade.
So they're trying to
So
work.
this doesn't represent ninth through 12.
I mean, for me, I would want to see more of
We are
that.
having a significant push at our secondary level to do more structured meetings. So to really use our Payrolls and our VTCAP data to really look closely at kids and say, do we need to do that additional layer of assessment? Do they need additional help really, or were they not? And so that's that conversation then with the students, like, here's your data, does that feel right to you? I want to give you some assessment decision that gives you that additional support so that you can back and track.
That a couple more kids getting.
Because it's supposed to be able to do today, but in meetings, but we are meeting regularly.
Yeah, I would be interested in half of this group is different.
But in terms of, you know, over data like Dibble Star and VTCAP,
Yeah.
in terms of UHS population, that is, are we?
Yeah, they're testing at the ninth grade level, because that's where Dibble's kind of seeing. So that's where Dibble's kind of tops out for its norm. So it's still really valuable to have an assessment at that level.
Yeah, that was
So I'd love for your students who really haven't gotten everything they need to have to be functionally
Collectively and more as a reflection of
that kids that don't have those foundational skills are going to exhibit more behavior. They're going to be a lot more supportive.
But how are we supporting those kids, you know, like, it sounds like, I'm just confused by, like, we have,
interesting to see the data
assessments
from third
up
grade
to, like, eighth grade.
Yeah, I mean, it goes all the way up.
It does, it goes up.
Yeah, but Dibble starts off
Data, yeah. But VTCAP, we're not.
the other is.
High stakes whereas a benchmark is 3 times a year at your grade level, and then if you're struggling, they might progress monitor you at the level you're actually functioning. So that might be a grade level below, or even 2 levels below, depending on the skill area. Because that gives us the sensitivity, when you do those frequent little checks, to see the progress.
It's a reflection on your
If you just did it at your grade level every time, and say, oh, you're failing, oh, yeah, they're failing, because they're not there yet.
Yeah, right. This is literacy, we're out because of the average 12th grade. And keep in mind, this is like, as Kate said, sort of like benchmark stick check. But then beyond that, a deeper dive can look like math test. Math is better than construction literacy, but like your social science test, like how do you demonstrate efficiency in a project?
If you could wrap up your conversations and start to make your way back to your seat, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I gotta go and take this test or whatever. Is there a good way to like?
Yeah. I like it.
Why?
It's basically, it's completely efficient, but you would offer my personal flavor.
There you go.
Because I would be running the world.
There you go.
Do I look like I'm running the world?
I look like you're running a lot, but
But I think it's important to have a balance of both, you know, I have kiddo ones that have so much more than my testimony.
It's true, you are. Like you said, you do where to assess it. Personally, it seems very well.
You don't wanna do it to everything because it's taking extra time.
Sure.
Yeah, away from
It's a question that correlation that the struggle I really had is because, you know, the VTCAP, if that's the, if the focus is on VTCAP, then we're thinking about, okay, what are other assessments and screener checks of how they correlate. I struggle with that. I don't know the answer. It doesn't mean, I think what I appreciate about this analysis is having a lot of confidence.
So is there like some like
and understanding
whatever
if you could wrap up your conversations and start moving back to your seats in the interest of time.
And I don't say so. I say frustrated, like
still have the ripples of the pandemic. They're still playing out.
Absolutely.
And I think too, like, I mean, obviously I'm elementary school, so I might get biased for this. It's just how aware, yes, it's great. Need to have more Stacy, you know, it's good. However,
You could wrap up your conversations and start coming back to your seats, that'd be great.
So that we know.
You got 7 things you're
Big opportunity with all these pathways. You know,
Yeah, she sent me an email.
but it also is terrible. You know, like, because he's about to go to high school.
What are his interests?
Thank you very much. On your note catcher, you have a couple of spots. We're gonna present some data and that you didn't get to look at closely. I appreciate you coming back. I know it was really hard to leave your conversation, that everyone was so deeply engaged in discussing what you were looking at, and I appreciate everyone coming back so we can continue with the next piece. There'll be more opportunity to ask questions and talk in a few minutes. So use your note catcher to capture your ideas as we present the slides moving forward.
We're really working on one of the high leverage instructional practices that we've been working on is grappling. So I think we had a good opportunity there to grapple, and it was good that we were also wanting to talk about the data. We're going to explain some of the ways that we're looking at these data from our district lens, and I think what really lends power to this process that we just experienced together is it's always so much more meaningful to talk about data with different perspectives from different schools, from different stakeholder groups, and so some of the things that we might have noticed might be different from what you have noticed, and that's okay. That's great, in fact, because I think it's all of us coming together to really look at this from multiple angles that ideally is part of the continuous improvement process and makes our system stronger. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about spring 2025 VTCAP ELA results, English Language Arts. These were just officially released on October 16th. So it's hot off the press. I actually reached out to the AOEs like, we have an important meeting on the 28th. So it's a little hot off the press. This first graph is showing our percentage proficiency by school change over the past 3 years. So VTCAP is taken by students in 3rd through 9th grade only. It's taken in the spring. We don't get the results until the following fall. One observation, though it's not across the board, is generally we're feeling pretty excited that most of our sites are seeing a consistent uptick in the percentage of students who are proficient. And keep in mind that cohorts are changing in these schools over time. It is notable that especially at UHS, it is an entirely different cohort that is being assessed each year. So we're not seeing results of growth over those 3 years necessarily. It's like Mark's a freshman and he takes it in 23. And then Kelly's a freshman and she takes it in 24. And Mark's results now are not captured in that next year. BAMS also is having 50% of students turning over every year. But in general, we're seeing positive trends in many of our schools. And in fact, we saw some unprecedented jumps in some of our schools this year. Last year was the first year we had full implementation of our EL literacy program in our K-6 and starting also at BAM's 7-8 schools. Also Jefferson and Putney was fully implemented. And so while we can't necessarily know causation, there does seem to be a correlation there a little bit with some positive trends that we're seeing. The state did not yet release overall statewide average. Here's the percent proficiency of all Vermonters. So we don't have that yet, but there is a hyperlink in the slides that leads you directly to the source report from the state if you want to check that out. We did, however, get from the state of Vermont what the average proficiency rate was in each grade level that took the spring 2025 VTCAP test. So this is showing last spring's proficiency rates by grade level, 3rd through 9th. The green bar is our students here, and the gray bar is the Vermont average. So in every grade level except for 6th and 9th last year, we are outperforming the state. It is notable that our percentage of students from historically marginalized groups in WSESU far surpasses the state average as well. So it's we're feeling like we're headed in the right direction with this in terms of having a population with some need in terms of percentage of students on IEPs facing economic disadvantage, and yet we're outperforming the state in many of our grade levels. We were pretty concerned about the drop with our 9th graders at BUHS when we got these results back. And we had some interesting conversations. We had a student in our group and we were talking about this. Not that we want to parallel the state average, but we are seeing also a dropping trend with the state there and wondering what that is about, and wondering how we can be communicating more effectively the purpose of VTCAP, how the data are used, why it's important, and how to get ideas to engage students in that assessment process. Yeah, and then finally we have these graphs, which are always a little confusing. Actually, I always think of you, Ruby, because you were so great the last time. You're like, wait, smaller is better on this one, right? So keep that in mind. This is our disaggregated performance gap. It's the amount of percentage different of performance of kids in these different categories. So for example, in 2023, the blue bar, the difference of kids' performance who were not coming from economically disadvantaged homes versus students who were coming from economically disadvantaged homes was a 27% gap. In other words, kids not from economically disadvantaged homes were performing 27% higher than the peers in the other group. Okay, does that make sense? So we are seeing a slow and steady decline in those gaps for our economic disadvantaged group, our IEP status, and we do have enough numbers to look at gender as well. We're not really seeing a notable gender gap, but that is included there. Because our multilingual learner population, although it is growing, and also our racial category populations are percentage-wise so small compared to the district as a whole, we cannot present those in a statistically significant way. because the percentages are just way too small. So those are not included here. The way that the state calculates these gaps is they actually kind of mush everything together to say, in general, is this student from a historically marginalized category or not? We like to break that out a little bit more so we can look at trends in a more discrete way. But for ELA last year, that percentage gap statewide was 32%. So in general, we are outperforming that because we have smaller bars for economic disadvantage, and we are underperforming that for our students on IEPs. So that's really a focus that we have right now of how to continue shrinking that gap. So there's ELA in a nutshell. I'm going to hand it to Stacey, who's going to talk about math. Similar flow of graphs now that we've understood it, but we'll go through the math data.
Perfect. So VTCAP math, similar explanation as what Bryn was talking about. VTCAP is really measuring lots of opportunities for students to engage in multi-step problems and solving those complex problems that require abstract reasoning and modeling. It's not just simple, straight up computation. And so how are students persevering with those problems and precision and using strategies to help them solve those problems over time? So looking at our data around math, you can see those same bars showing the 3 years over time at each school. And so thinking about some celebrations that we notice, some schools really showing some increase, and how can we capitalize on that increase and replicate it in other places. That's kind of where our focus always is. Thinking about how we're performing in relation to that state average. As Bryn mentioned, the overall average of the state of Vermont for the 2025 has not been released yet, so waiting for that data to see how we are in comparison to that over time. And really thinking about implementing our illustrative math curriculum and how that creates an opportunity for students to just practice over time. And sometimes teachers struggle with this idea of like, I gotta teach this until they get all of it, and everyone gets 100%, that idea of teaching it to mastery. And so thinking about how we're supporting teachers as they work on spiral review and practicing over and over and over again throughout the year to help build that proficiency. Similar graph as ELA, you can see this comparison for grade levels, showing the green bar for our district and gray for the state proficiency. And so thinking about those bars over time and how where we're seeing pockets. We're within 2 points in many places, so we're close to that state proficiency across grade levels. So thinking about those as points of celebration, even though our overall proficiency, we would like to continue to increase those. And again, as Bryn explained, the historically marginalized subgroups and how those graphs, again, smaller is better in this case. So thinking about the trend we're seeing in terms of closing those gaps for students experiencing economic disadvantage and students on IEPs. So continuously working on how we improve that in math over time.
We did see a little bump in the gender disaggregation this year, especially for math, with males outperforming females in math. And so I know several schools were looking very closely at that, and some even included that in their CIP goals for this year of trying to really think about equitable access for all students. So VTCAP is great in terms of looking long-term. It's the best summative assessment instrument that we have to really look at proficiency over time related to how students at certain grade levels are acquiring and showing proficiency with very robust Common Core state standards. It's not that helpful though when kids take the test last year between March and April, and then we get the results in October. It's not very actionable data. It doesn't help us in the moment know what individual schools or grade levels or sites might need. And so we have really been focusing on using our benchmark results as a predictor to see how we're doing on something like a state assessment like VTCAP. And we worked for many years to try to get more and more refined with our universal screening or benchmark systems to be predictive and to give us more actionable information about how we're doing and where we can adjust. So Mark went over this, but just to remind ourselves, universal assessments are given to every student at grade level. And since 2 years ago, we now have every student in our system assessed from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade with some universal screeners. That's expanded. And we're using some common screeners across our system as well, so there's not this kind of jarring system change when kids come from 6th to 7th grade or 8th to 9th grade. And we think of universal assessments as kind of like a dipstick, like a temperature check. Overall, are we well, or do we need some more information? And then when we need more information, we go more into diagnostic screeners. But we're gonna share briefly here what our fall 2025 benchmark results look like. And we definitely do monitor our trends over time to see if changes that we're doing, curriculum that we're implementing is having the intended impact that we might wanna see. So this is a side-by-side of answering that question, can we feel good about our universal screeners? Are they generally predictive of how students are gonna go on to perform on a much bigger and robust assessment like the VTCAP? So the green bar is the percent proficient on our screener, and the orange bar is the percent proficient on VTCAP as of last year. And so when we're looking spring to spring, our DIBEL screener, which for most kids is a 1-minute read of a grade level passage, that's it, takes 1 minute, was within 2 points of predicting our overall VTCAP proficiency. Our STAR screener was used last year at BAMS and BUHS, and that's now expanded to all of our middle and high schools for this year, but that was within 3 points of predicting VTCAP proficiency. And then STAR Math is used for 2nd through 12th graders. That was a little further off last year, 4 points, but still, we're finding that our screeners are within 5 points predictability of how kids are gonna do overall. And so when we look at our screeners and we notice students who might need more support, we're then monitoring even more frequently with progress monitoring to see if the changes and instructional impact that we're having is working the way that we hope, and if not, we can adjust and change things in a continuous cycle. The correlations between those screeners are over on the right-hand side of the screen, and in general, if there's any statisticians out there, those are very, very strong correlations in terms of our screeners and our VTCAP results. So over time, here's how we've done on our literacy benchmark screeners, and this is the past 3 falls, so how kids are coming to us. And so you can see the green bar is 23, blue is 24, and then yellow is 2025. In general, we're seeing kind of a stagnant rate as we look across our whole district, and I know sometimes we're really shaking our heads and like, we get kids in the fall and we do so much work all year and we have so many more kids proficient by this spring, and then we have 10 weeks off in the summer and we get kids back in, we're kind of starting that cycle over again. Not everywhere, but that's something that we're paying attention to. So how can systematically we continue to inch the whole system forward? So it's definitely one thing that we're paying attention to. Here are our 3-year STAR math trends by school in the fall. And it was a few slides back, but interestingly, this mirrored our VTCAP math results pretty strongly in terms of some of the growth rates that we were seeing over the past 3 years. And our screeners now not only tell us the percentage of students proficient, but also what is the percentage of students who are growing at a growth rate that's faster than average. So even though they may not be proficient yet, they are closing that gap, which sometimes takes 2 or 3 or 4 years to really achieve that. But we're monitoring what that growth rate is so that we can, with time, look at how we're growing over time. It's not just about you did it or you didn't. It's looking at saying, how are we growing over time to really support kids' learning? So those are our math trends over time.
Just one observation that Katie made in our small group is that fall of 2025 exceeds, at every single school, exceeds the fall of 23 and 24.
And this 3-year trend is also showing the 3 years that, as Stacey was mentioning, we are implementing our IM math program, now K-8 as well. So that's a universal curricular program that's being used across our whole system. So I know you thought about your own section and potentially took some other notes as we went through the other two sections. And we're gonna ask you to hold those notes, and we will revisit at the end if there are specific questions out there that we can either answer tonight, or if we can't answer on the spot, we can gather and make sure that we get answers to, because as we talked about in the beginning, having lots of different perspectives and lots of different questions ultimately enrich our system to help us ask better questions to put better systems in place, ultimately. So we're gonna translate all of those numbers into what does that look like in a school. So I'm gonna turn it over to Mark, who's gonna talk a little bit about that CIP process, and we'll look at the story of 4 different schools.
Okay, again, just to review the process for developing our CIP, which happens throughout the course of the school year based on information that we gather over the course of that year, as well as historically that we're presenting tonight. But again, we reviewed this graph earlier on, but identify a goal, invest in a plan, sustain that plan, and then assess where we're at in terms of that full implementation of the plan. What were the results? And just a cycle that continues. Again, here are the specific CIP goals. I think what's new this year is the second paragraph on the literacy and math goals, where we've identified to increase our results and our gap, sustaining that individual student growth percentile will get us to where we want to go. So it's really a way of looking at not red, yellow, green, every kid, but every kid where they are and what is their growth rates. And so it's more of an individualized goal as well as a collective goal. So given that, we're going to tell a few stories from some specific schools that have asked to share out.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Some of you might recall I had done a similar presentation in the spring, so you'll see a familiar slide. But here, I won't read it out loud, but that is our math goal that's part of our CIP plan to obviously increase overall proficiency, focusing on the growth percentile that Mark just talked about, and over time, hoping that decreases the gaps that we're seeing amongst our various learners. So we'll explore what the growth rate has looked like over time, trends in STAR and how that relates to the VTCAP, and then specifically one cohort's kind of story on building proficiency. With the intentions that pacing has really played an important role in these outcomes. We talked a lot about that last year and really kind of harped on that, and not teaching to, they're not going to meet the standard every time, but that's a goal they're working on, and things get revisited throughout the curriculum, so not focusing on mastery. And then we also have done co-teaching in math, and really working on the alignment of our interventions to match what kids are doing in core instruction. And this year, I'm hoping one thing that will have an impact is we just started talking as vertical teams. So our math teachers, because we departmentalize at Green Street, so our K-6 math teachers are meeting regularly to talk about math instruction and what that looks like. So we're hoping to really hone in on improving instruction throughout the year. So the next slide, so these are the 2-year math improvements. This was a slide I shared at a meeting last year where we had 82.2% of our kids meeting that growth percentile rate, and so connecting that to obviously overall proficiency and how that impacted that, and that next, the contributing factors I really just talked about, but pacing really being, I think, a driving force in that.
And then this is the remarkable VTCAP trend, where we saw significant growth from last spring to this spring. And yeah, Bryn had texted me one day this summer, like, hey, can I call you? I have some news. I'm like, oh, yay, we got a grant. I don't know. And when she shared this, it gave me goosebumps. It was so cool, and made sure to celebrate with staff and just reiterate, like, it might not feel like it day to day or when you're like in it, because it's really hard work, but to celebrate this is what's happening, and it's really good for kids. And our fall to fall benchmark data, so this last fall we were at 34.8% when kids took the fall benchmark. This year at the fall we're starting at 42.2%, and so we're just looking now to even increase that even more, so that's really exciting. And then this just shows this one cohort who previously last year, I believe, right, Bryn?
23-24.
The year before, the 23-24, so when they're now in 7th grade. This cohort did not receive, this shows the assessments that were logged for math throughout all the units for the year. And as you can see, they did not get to every unit. So kids in that grade were not exposed to grade level content, all the content that they should have been for that grade. And so you see the limited amount of proficiency in that group, and much more significant students below proficiency, which is represented by the yellow and the orange. And then the following year, this is what the pacing and what the completion of all units in math looked like, and the impact. See how it's like reversed. The amount of students that were proficient on VTCAP or scored a 3 or a 4. And so as you see there, the significant impact and growth alone in that one cohort is pretty incredible.
Cool. Thanks, Kate.
Well,
very exciting. I wanted to take an opportunity to share out some work that we're doing in literacy. When we met to talk about this, I had come out of several team meetings where we actually were looking at data, and often we're thinking about how are we going to intervene for students to help catch them up or get them to grade level. And several teams that I had met with, we were like, oh my goodness, we have the opposite of what we're used to doing, and we have the majority of our kids who are, based on the benchmark data, at or above the grade level. And so we could really spend some time as a team thinking about how do we provide such the intensive support that our kids who need that, represented by the red squares, how do we really individualize the instruction for those kiddos during our skills block time, and then allow for the kids who are at or above grade level to really experience more practice at grade level and in the text that they're reading. So we have a lot of companion text through our EL curriculum. And it was a different conversation than we usually have, which is around how do we make sure all of these kids are caught up. And in these 3 cases, we have kids who are where they need to be right now. And so it's about pushing them a little bit more and using the resources that we have available to support the kids not only in these classes, but in other classes where there is a higher need for intervention, to use those resources differently than we have in the past. And so this felt like an exciting opportunity to say, we're getting there, we're making some progress, and we can do the work, and the kids who are at or above grade level can continue to do this work and be exposed to and engage in grade appropriate text and information. This relates to our CIP goal of increasing the growth rate. So we really had our CIP was based on closing those gaps. So by using our resources in a different way, rather than everybody gets small group instruction, it's really the kids who need small group instruction that are getting that.
And the kids who don't need that can work in the classroom. And we had some teachers who were so excited. They were like, this is the best planning time I've had. They made window panes, so kids had some choice in the activities that they got to do. There were some expectations, like these are the things that everybody has to do, but you get to pick when you do it during the week. So giving some kids some agency around their own learning and the things that they want to do and the topics that they want to learn about. And it's nice to be able to talk about, you know, where things are going well. And so I wanted to share that story with you today. Thanks.
For Guilford. Thinking about, for us, if as you looked at the data, you can see that our trends are not going the way that we want them to go. And so what I reflected upon as I looked at our benchmarking data last spring, and then I was looking at the VTCAP data as it began coming into the summer, it was really a process of going back to some of those values that Mark began our meeting with around student-centered decision-making, around integrity and accountability, around collective efficacy. And so beginning in the spring and over the summer, really doing a deep dive into our data with my leadership team, who volunteered their time to work with me through the summer. And then as we finalized our master schedule in the fall, we changed our master schedule. We had, the year before, we had done some experimenting. Our data has historically been very strong, and we wanted to try a few different things, which we did. They didn't work. They simply didn't work. And so this year, based upon our data, we have increased our core literacy and math from 4 days a week to 5 days a week. Our intervention blocks, we've reintroduced our intervention blocks instead of an experiment that we did last year. We have a very strong data team where we are looking at our data on a weekly basis. And we are using the new systems in our school, like Forefront, which is a database for looking at both weekly assessment data, the benchmarking data, et cetera. And so what we've been working on goes back to the heart of the state's definition around continuous improvement in terms of thinking about collaborative inquiry, about looking at multiple sources of data, and about building appropriate structures and practices to be put into place. We work through this is fluid. Even today, working with one of my instructional coaches, thinking about what the data is telling us right now in terms of the gaps in student learning and how we can match that with teacher PD to be able to respond to what the data is telling us. Part of our improvement plan is I have an excellent instructional coach with a master's in math instruction, and we have mapped out a years-long PD for our elementary teachers around math instruction, best practice. We've revised our agendas for our weekly meetings, for our ESTs, more of a focus on looking at what are the gaps in core instruction. And we have a high sense of collective efficacy, that we can do this working together. Another piece of the puzzle for us is, as I've spoken about in the past, is we've hired several new teachers for our school. And in the hiring process, reflecting on the data, thinking about our experiences, particularly last year, looking for people that are really well adept at building relationships with children, at the same time being highly skilled in either math or in literacy. We're doing more of the compartmentalizing that Kate spoke of at Green Street. And so our tale is one of looking at the data, responding to the data, making a plan, and we are continually monitoring it. I'm really excited to see what our results will be at the end of the year. And then the final piece I wanted to address is that we, a couple of years ago, along with Putney, were recognized for holistic education. And so this evening, we're talking a lot about data around academics, around math and literacy specifically, but we've also carved out time for children to be outside, to engage in play, to be in nature, and we set aside specific times for celebrations. We just recently, last week, had a farm and field day, which there was an article in the Commons around that, celebrating our agricultural heritage. So we're really looking for that blend of the academic along with other aspects that are also vitally important for our children. So that is the tale that we are living in Guilford this year.
Okay. You probably remember that many of our schools had an attendance-related goal back in June when we presented our CIPs. And I would just want to celebrate some initial outcomes for Academy School based on our attendance goal. We're looking to reduce chronic absenteeism and tardies pretty significantly based on a pretty steady increase since COVID time. So this relates back to our district CIP goal of sense of belonging, and also really, if you think about all of the things we're talking about tonight, you have to be at school in order to increase achievement. And when you're at school on time, you're setting up your day for success. You're having breakfast, you're being greeted, you're doing your morning routine, you're settling in a way where you're having a morning meeting with your class instead of coming in late and wondering what you missed. So all of those things are really important to success, and instilling those habits at an early age for our kids leads to better outcomes when they get to middle and high school. So, sorry, I'm trying to do both things. At what we've been doing, last year we started a targeted team focused on increasing attendance and decreasing tardiness. So we had a team of people who worked under the Community Schools Grant to make calls to specific students and families to talk about barriers for them, specifically in terms of their absenteeism and tardiness. We also started this year really strong with a lot of messaging, maybe too much messaging, but you can never have too much, from me, from the office, about the importance of coming to school on time, looking at our traffic patterns. If you've ever come to Academy School or driven by in the morning, you know it's a really tight time and there's a lot of traffic, but we've done everything we can to make it flow smoothly so that people can get in and out and get kids dropped off. And we keep in touch with families really closely regarding that. We've also made sure to be clear about when to stay home if you're not feeling well, and that's sort of been a struggle that we've all had since COVID, because things changed a lot. And so if you aren't feeling well, we want you to stay home and get better, but if you're feeling okay, please try to come to school. If you need to go to the nurse, you can go to the nurse. And putting in place really student-specific measures for kids with a history of truancy. And that's different for every kid. We had a meeting today with a family and a student who is having a hard time coming to school. We came up with a plan for what that student wants to do when they arrive at school in the morning. And they left smiling about, like, I'm gonna be here early tomorrow because I get to help you greet kids in the morning out front. And then if I have 3 days in a row of coming on time, I get this. So making those steps for kids. And we're also announcing at All Schools Sing and in our newsletter the data that we're coming out with and celebrating that we're increasing our attendance. So just some initial outcomes, we're only 2 months in, but it's worth celebrating. We've had 734 fewer tardies this year as compared to this time last year.
That's significant.
It's a 42% improvement. And 221 fewer absences, 26% improvement. So we're really excited about it, and our kids are really excited about it, and we're celebrating that together. And as you know, the days get shorter and darker, really emphasizing that we're doing well and to keep it up, and being on top of, you know, if we're looking at trajectories. Actually, Orly Kaspani, our assistant principal, just went to a workshop and calculated through a formula they had that if you have 4 or more absences at this point in the year, that will lead to chronic absenteeism by June. So we're looking at that every couple of weeks at our wellness team meetings and watching for that pattern to be established and trying to nip it as soon as possible.
Dual enrollment. So dual enrollment is something I am talking about, but Rhonda Weingartner is really the queen behind the program, and she is absolutely unbelievable and is so passionate about this to the point of we have 57 dual enrollment classes between WRCC and BOHS that are offered in-house and taught by BOHS or WRCC teachers who are highly qualified with master's degrees in their content area, which allows them to get the certification to be able to teach college level courses. The next school in the state after us is in the single digits for what they offer in dual enrollment classes. So BOHS Career Center, like, we are very proud of what we have to offer for students in this way. And yeah, so I think, you know, if you go, there's 3 ways that you can do it. One of them is you do it at high school. The other one, we have, I think, in the neighborhood of 20 students this year who technically unenroll as BOHS students for their senior year, and then they go to CCV and take all of their courses at CCV or online through CCV, and then they basically re-enroll and graduate from BOHS at the end of that experience. And you know, the tuition savings, it doesn't cost BOHS students anything to take these courses. And if you go to the next slide, so this is just a breakdown of 15 faculty members. So 159 of our current students are enrolled in at least one dual enrollment course this school year. And of those 159, 27 of them are taking at least 2 or more dual enrollment courses throughout this year. And then, yep, so 19 students are doing early college right now. If you go to the next slide. So this is the breakdown of the financial savings for students of how much it would be costing them this school year alone for the students in our building who are taking dual enrollment classes, the savings of almost $270,000. And I don't know if either of you want to talk about your experience in dual enrollment classes or.
Yeah, I could. I'm in 4 dual enrollment classes this year. So I've been taking advantage of them as much as I can. It's super exciting to get to take those higher level classes and not have to pay a ton of money to take them in college. Yeah, so I've taken a ton throughout high school, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. There's a lot of scholarship availabilities for those, so a lot of students really aren't paying anything. It's pretty great.
I would say I think it was my first year in this position, we switched from opt-in to opt-out. And so originally Rhonda was like trying to talk students into taking it as dual enrollment, even though it was the exact same class. And so then we started saying, okay, everyone's in unless you want to opt out of it. And so it changed, I think, the mindset for students who felt like they can't take a college class or they wouldn't be successful, and realizing that some of our students maybe that weren't college bound or didn't think they could do it are now finding success with it, and it allows them more opportunity to feel like maybe that's the next step for them.
Okay, well, we're gonna end the evening talking a bit about social emotional supports in place.
Yeah, I think this really builds on what you were saying, John, in terms of we have a lot of academic data at our fingertips, and how are we enhancing our systems, our MLSS systems, our multi-layered systems of support for social emotional learning and to support kids staying at school. Kelly talked a little bit about supporting absenteeism and also really pushing toward graduation as well. We need to have relationships and feel like we belong in order to do that work. And it has come up as a need in the district that it seems like we have a lot of MLSS systems in place for academics, and a real desire of our staff and families to be building similar systems for what we call SEL. So that's really a need right now that we're focusing on, and thinking about how to bring in best practice, evidence-based practice to monitor social emotional learning. So I won't read all of this, but there are a lot of studies out there that show that being able to take kind of that temperature on how students are feeling socially and emotionally is also very important, and then building in extra layers for support when needed and taking those out when not. And so we're taking a look at what are called the CASEL standards, which are standards for social emotional learning. For the first time, well, we started one meeting last spring, but for a series of 5 or 6 meetings, we're bringing all of our counselors and social workers, K-12, together across the district to work on common goals and look at some tools for social emotional monitoring and also learning as it relates to our sense of belonging and wellness in the district. So some highlights of that work this year that we wanted to talk about briefly were those meetings to unify best practice. We are piloting some social emotional learning screeners as part of our MLSS system. And then thinking about, what do all kids get? What is our core experience and instruction for students to really practice some of the skills that are there in terms of being a human in a classroom and navigating the world socially. So we're really having a focus on that, and we're using a program called Second Step, which was requested actually a couple years ago by our counselors. There's a lot on the plate to fit and not enough hours in the school day, so I think our implementation of Second Step has been varied in some of our schools, and there's a much bigger push this year to try to implement that with a little more fidelity to see what kind of impact it's going to have on our learning. Some of our schools are also implementing programs such as developmental designs, PBIS. We're looking at the habits of character that are embedded in our EL literacy program, so there are many kind of arms of this work, but we're trying to align them wherever possible. And we're also taking a look at our kindergarten readiness. We have a record number of kindergartners this year who came to school not potty trained. And so thinking about what are the skills that our kindergartners need and how do we do vertical alignment with our preschool programs in order to start building some of that capability so kids are coming socialized and ready to learn in our system. And there's no VTCAP score for social emotional learning, and we do have some normed instruments that are really helpful for us over time, but hard to react to in that moment. So we're really asking ourselves, how do we measure something that's nuanced and kind of difficult to measure? So we're looking at other districts to see what best practices they have. And here are some of the many things that we have in place this year to try to address how are we improving with our sense of belonging and social emotional learning. So we're looking at achievement of our goals in our counselor social worker group, trying out some SEL screeners at some of our schools. In fact, I think Oak Grove is in the process of piloting that right now. We went to a training with a couple counselors who were like, let's go, let's try it, let's just see, does it help? So we'll be looking at that. Talked about Second Step program is an evidence-based program, and they really find that we hit those evidence markers when at least 75% of lessons are taught. So we're really trying to make sure that we're doing that this year in our K-6 schools. And they've implemented some resources for tier 2 and 3 social emotional supports that are also evidence-based, that kind of have a scope and sequence of supports and lessons for kids. We're doing, of course, our panorama surveys this year, but also looking at more school-based surveys as well. I think I saw one go out at Guilford the other day in terms of measuring specific things related to individual school goals, trusted adults, how kids are feeling, because our panorama surveys also only start at 3rd grade, and so we're missing some of our key demographic there. I talked about K-readiness skills and having pre-K grade level meetings this year, and really looking at the, Vermont does an annual K-readiness survey, so looking at some of that data to guide some of our work. And then we've been talking a lot about street data, which is the data that you see observationally, or you have through focus groups, or you have through meetings with a student leadership group. That's hard to get a firm number on. I think it's, Riley and Willow, kind of what you were talking about in terms of the project that you were proposing at the last board meeting. And so how are we collecting street data about how our stakeholders are really feeling on the ground and what the needs are, hearing directly from students and families to guide some of our work as well. So it's certainly a work in progress, and it's definitely not perfect yet, but I think we're really in kind of that messy cycle of continuous improvement with our SEL work, and we wanted to be very transparent about the many things that we're trying to really forge kind of that foundational piece in our school, which is connection to school and a sense of belonging in our community. So that's some of the work that's happening, and we'll continue to report out about that as the year progresses.
So So that concludes our presentation for this evening. Obviously, we'll open it up for questions or feedback or comments. Matt?
I'm just really impressed with the entire district and the numbers. I think bear out the hard work that y'all are doing, so thank you again, everybody.
I'm impressed with the multifaceted approach that different sites are taking. And it's not a one size fits all. And that it's again and again, I think what John was saying, that the PD is linked to the needs of instructors, right, over the course of the year, rather than it just being a generalized, everybody sitting in the auditorium listening to a lecture. So, not to just single out Guilford, but I'm hearing that same approach at every school. So, this has been a very interesting, informative evening. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure.
So, yeah,
I would like to single out Academy because your report on your decreasing absenteeism is just, that is going to continue to be a problem throughout the entire country, and you're on board earlier. Good, thank you.
Thanks, we're working hard, hopefully it continues.
it makes me think of,
Yeah.
it makes me think of family engagement. And, you know, you said maybe I'm placing too many calls, but you're not. Absolutely not. So, Ruby?
I really appreciated all of the presentations here, and one of the things that I think was really valuable to me was hearing student voice. And, you know, Riley, thanks for sharing, and kind of, you know, that you were on the spot there for a second. But I would really appreciate you know, almost like a profile of a student, particularly in the high school through the dual enrollment, understanding what is that class. So, you know, Riley had 4 classes. I don't know any kids in that program, so I don't have the firsthand experience. I'd love to see that a little bit more clearly, because I think that we've been hearing more and more about that particular program, and we're really, you know, we're thinking of the portrait of a graduate, we're thinking about that, you know, like the pathways. So what does that really look like? I think it'd be valuable for us as a community to know that. So that's just a suggestion.
So, Ruby, how many high school students do you know who go to UHS or to the Career Center? I mean, I'm just asking in general.
Yeah, I know quite a few.
Okay, so you probably know kids who are taking dual enrollment classes, and those classes are embedded into, they're taught at the same time as the regular high school class, usually under the high school class title, but they also carry a college title, and the teacher teaches the high school curriculum, teaches the college curriculum to all of the students in the room. So if you know a student who's taking statistics or advanced algebra 2 or my forestry program.
I was gonna say, mentor and leadership, all these students are going into the elementary schools, and that's a dual enrollment class. So I know, right, Willow, are you in that also? Yeah, okay.
So there are literally
It's just
over
embedded.
100 kids taking dual enrollment, and it's actually embedded right into the regular curriculum in the classroom. So it's not a separate program, it's a series of courses that have all been identified as matching up to a similar college course, so that we can offer them concurrently at the same time with the same teacher.
Willow, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think what Rhonda's really done a lot of work with the with the opt-out program is that you come into this class and immediately you're set up, you're registered for this college, and immediately you go right into being taught college level material. And then whatever waivers there are for any fees of that class are really accessible for any students. And so it's really, really integrated into the learning, and you don't kind of question like, oh, is this a high school based class, is this a college based class? You can just kind of go in and it feels like it's an everyday class, but you're really doing so much more with it.
Thanks for
So
sharing.
I bet you know kids who are, well, all I'm saying is I bet you know kids who are taking dual enrollment classes, but it doesn't, like stand
I
out.
think, I guess what the suggestion is like having a profile so that we have like what's it's not every kid, it's what's this kid's experience, and using that as kind of like a guide for understanding all the things we're talking about. Like when you say something's embedded, I think that might mean something different to someone who's boots on the ground in the high school versus a parent who's a little bit more peripheral. And so, but seeing the experience of and hearing the experience of a student, I think is really valuable. So that was really the feedback point there, because I think that tells the story in a way in a really tangible way.
And I think what I meant by Rhonda being a champion is like she is someone, she will see a course being offered in her high school and she'll say like, oh, I know what that class matches to at what college. And then she reaches out to the college and she says, we have this class at BUHS and I'd love to compare the syllabi to see if it's connected enough that this could be offered as a college course through your program with our teacher teaching it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's something that's already pre-existing that she's having the notices of we could make this something a little more for our students.
So I think this is, relates to what Willow and Riley presented at the last board meeting, which is having a sense of transitions, going from especially middle school to 9th grade. And in our group, we talked about what it means to be a 9th grader and why the numbers are so skewed as you look at BUHS. And that 9th grade is really not far removed from 7th and 8th grade. It's still part of that complexity, and then something, and I know this as a teacher, something happens in 10th grade, and then you have a totally different person by the time you get to 11th grade. So a lot of this is growing, and what happens to the brain over time. I think there is some validity to taking a look at that transition from middle school to 9th grade and who that 9th grader is and why the drop-off is so extreme at that point. Because that's not a factor of BUHS. There's something going on, and Riley presented an increased sense of freedom in 9th grade, which may be a bit of a jolt for that individual, for that group.
I would say especially for kids coming from Dummerston, and just because of the smallness in the community, like, and John, Julianne, and I were emailing the other night just about how do we transition students in a stronger way when they're coming from this space they've been in for 9 or 10 years with one cohort to a class of 200 students.
Right.
It's a big transition.
Right. Big hallways, lots of bathrooms.
Too many bathrooms.
We talk about bathrooms a lot. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being able to share that work and where we are at this moment in time in the school year.
Thank you.
So can I say, well, yes, let's applaud. So we have an SD meeting on Tuesday at Putney Central at 6 o'clock. And I think it'll be nice. It's 1 week from now. So as this presentation gels for us, I've already put out the agenda, but there's space to come back to this and with observations and questions.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so thank you.
And you all have access to the presentation that was shared last week, but I'll get it on the website tomorrow morning as well.
All right. Thank you.
Ruby and I will be late because we have leadership council till 7:15.
Oh, this is on the 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I know that we've had a commitment of making sure that we have a school board member attending the leadership councils, but with the shift in our schedule due to the holidays, there's just an overlap. So that's a choice that we can make. We either, we can send a report to the leadership council and say we won't be there, or I will be late to this meeting.
That's a hard decision.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. Any other observations? All right, well, thank you, everyone. Wow. So this is officially 3 board meetings.
Is there a motion that Vernon adjourns?
Make that motion.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, Vernon is adjourned at 7:36.
Is there a motion for the SD to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Carrie?
There being no further business before this board, I move the SU adjourns.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? And we are adjourned at 7:36. Thank you very much to the SU board and all.